Chocolate. People adore it in ways that defy words. With all our senses, we desire this food like no other. Most of the world has enjoyed chocolate for only the past few centuries, but knowledge of chocolate goes back thousands of years. It was the native peoples of Central America and Mexico who first cultivated an unusual tree called cacao and unlocked the divine secret of chocolate. In 16th century Europe, chocolate began its transformation from a pungent ritual drink into the modern forms that fuel today's global obsession. Explore how this food of the gods crossed oceans, influenced cultures, and ended up in a box of irresistible morsels, keeping us spellbound throughout the ages. The infamous Italian lover, Casanova, was so convinced that chocolate was the elixir of love, he drank it regularly while pursuing his amorous adventures. But he was by no means the first to recognize its power. At least 2,000 years before, people throughout Mesoamerica revered chocolate, making it part of their spiritual life and ritual ceremonies. To explore the magic of chocolate, we begin with their story in the caves of Central America, ancient pathway to a mystical Mayan underworld.
My name's Keith Proofer. I'm an archaeologist, and since 1993 I've been working on a large archaeological project in the Maya Mountains of southern Belize. The Maya Mountains are a particularly interesting area to work in. There's literally thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of caves in the area, all of which were used for ceremonial purposes by the ancient Maya, and a number of these caves are quite spectacular.
To the ancient Maya, caves were believed to be portals to an underworld realm called Xibalba. From here, the all-powerful gods regulated the movements of the universe, orchestrated the seasons, and controlled lightning, wind, and rain.
These deities are responsible for the everyday health and well-being of both individuals and communities. And one of the reasons the caves were so important is because they are the access points to the inside of the earth, to these earth-dwelling deities. So of course the Maya used caves as a place where they could come to leave offerings or make requests of these various deities. It's the clear path to them.
Deep within the rainforest of central Belize, archaeologists make a daily 2-hour ascent to reach the sacred Chinona Cave. They have come to the region to better understand the ritual life and the role of chocolate among the Maya. High above a fertile chocolate-growing river valley, this ceremonial shrine was, for centuries, a religious focal point for the ancient Maya people to pay homage to their gods.
There's some things to know about Xibalba, the Maya underworld. There are a lot of places to slip and fall. We all have bruises to prove it. And everywhere you look, there are artifacts all over the floor. And it's really difficult when all you can see is what's in your head light. But if you see something, just don't step on it.
Before reaching the ceremonial core of the cave, they encounter the remains of a human sacrificial offering.
This is the hip. The size of it makes it look like a male. The human remains are here and here. And then we came up this side and climbed up onto this raised area here, which is the great platform. Really, we're sitting on a high, flat area in the middle of the cave with burned areas all around us. There's charcoal from incense in here. This was a really special place, and right behind us is an altar.
Here, in a haze of ritual copal smoke, the Maya used these grinding stones called metates to prepare their offerings to the gods. Among the offerings, chocolate.
We're trying to understand what sorts of rituals they conducted within the caves. And the indicators that we have thus far are that the rituals were very much focused on agricultural fertility.
Caves are clearly markers of fertility. It's been long known that Maya caves are the place where the rains originate from. Mists that are seen coming from caves early in the morning or late in the afternoon are thought to be clouds that emerge and then create rain.
For a long time I had been wondering about the sources of cacao that the ancient Maya had utilized. And you can see that all around us there are chocolate trees or cacao trees. And if you go back into the hills that ring this valley, there is lots of evidence of wild cacao trees up in the hills, which suggests that cacao has been grown here for hundreds, if not thousands of years.
Excavations on the valley floor begin to reveal a 1,200-year-old town dedicated to chocolate production. Even in our own time, the Hershey Chocolate Corporation owned this land and cultivated cacao from these very groves. The gods assured this continuous productivity. In this rare Mayan book, the moon goddess negotiates a deal with Choc, the rain god, to perpetuate Earth's growing cycles. They consummate the deal with an exchange of chocolate. And female fertility idols, sprouting cacao pods from their bodies, protected the crops and provided an abundant harvest. Their powers extended as well to human abundance. Agricultural and human fertility have always been linked with chocolate. Even today, in some regions of the Mayan world, cacao beans and chocolate are used in marriage ceremonies as a symbol of fertility and wealth.
The family of the bride will present cacao seeds to the family of the groom, who then take the seeds, prepare the cacao, and then bring it back as an offering to the entire wedding party.
For the wedding, the Quechua people are used to drink the cacao. This is from a long time. The girl's parents, they bring us cacao, and the boy's parents, they give back the cacao drink. To all the people, share the drink.
This practice is rooted in pre-Columbian ritual, in which the classic Maya frequently offered bags of cacao beans as a marriage dowry. Chocolate was also a key element in marriage rites among Oaxacan royalty. The 12th century Zapotec marriage of Lady 8 Deer and 13 Snake was just one of many marriages consummated with a foaming cup of chocolate.
Cacao has an important function in these life events, these transition periods in people's lives.
Cacao mixed with virgin water was sprinkled in pre-Columbian rites that resembled baptism. But in matters of death, ritual use of cacao and chocolate went beyond the grave. To the Maya, the dead journeyed into a surreal underworld of danger to face perilous battles with the deities, and only in victory would they be reborn into the heavens. At a well-concealed tomb at the ruins of Rio Azul in northeast Guatemala, Dr. Grant Hall pried open the airtight capstone and wriggled down into the burial chamber below. There, he encountered walls covered with murals, and stretched out on a cotton mattress lay the decayed remains of a 5th century nobleman. Close by were 14 ceramic vessels that once contained food.
These pots and other vessels were meant to sustain the dead person in their journey.
One in particular caught his eye. It had an unusual shape with a screw-top lid. The painted glyphs on its surface revealed the name of the nobleman and described an ancient recipe for chocolate, which included this glyph, the spelling for chocolate, Cacao. The liquid contents inside had long since disappeared, but Dr. Hall sent residue samples to the Hershey labs for chemical analysis.
The Hershey Research Institute got in touch with me and said, we have detected chemical residues of theobromine and caffeine. That's what give it its stimulative value. And he said the only product in the New World that contains both is cacao. We've pretty well demonstrated that the little twist top pot as well as the tripod cylinder vessels that had the liquid lines in them definitely had cacao in them.
To energize the soul, the dead needed chocolate, the world's first caffeinated beverage, to face arduous underworld challenges. And perhaps that's why priests, presiding over ritual sacrifice in Aztec times, offered a final cup of chocolate to their victims before ripping out their hearts. Chocolate was sacred and revered, and its ritual use goes back at least 2,600 years. Proof of this lies here at Kolha, Belize. Excavating in the ceremonial center of the city, archaeologists unearthed these vessels buried in the graves of the city's elite.
On this table are 14 spouted vessels. We have conclusive proof that some of these spouted vessels did indeed contain cacao. The date of 600 BC is at least 1,000 years earlier than any other evidence that we have about the actual substances that these kind of vessels contained.
But of all the elite burials where chocolate has been found, none is stranger than the Mayan shaman discovered in this cave by Keith Proofer.
The guy that we found in the Bat-Soup cave, we think he was a Maya shaman. We know he was an important person because he was wearing a huge necklace of jade and shell beads. This and the rest of the artifacts found in the cave certainly indicate that this was not a common person. This was a person of considerable importance and status. These beads are jade, and these beads are highly polished jade of a couple different varieties. And then after he was put in the cave and buried up, beautiful and very elaborate ceremonial ceramics were left on top of it. And he was buried in this cave. His head was cut off and placed in his lap. A bowl of cacao beans was placed upside down in his lap along with the head. And then where his head was, they put another bowl and put a jade bead on it.
Why would a Mayan shaman be buried with this small bowl of cacao in his lap? Archaeologists can only speculate. But to this day, offerings of chocolate to the dead continue in many regions of Mexico, such as here in Oaxaca. During the festival of Dia de los Muertos, or Day of the Dead, families honor and remember their deceased ancestors. According to tradition, the dearly departed return in spirit form to spend the day with the living and to indulge in earthly pleasures. The festival combines pre-Hispanic ritual with Catholic observances, mixed with a dose of irreverence. In the home, the ritual revolves around an altar that each household makes for their deceased loved ones.
The tradition for everyone is the same, whether you're rich or poor. In every house, you're going to see one of these. Because if there isn't one of these, when those that have died come back and they don't find anything, they get sad and they return crying. They cry of sadness because the family doesn't remember them at all. They've been forgotten.
Él es papá de ellas, papá de estas niñas, y ellos son los papás de mi mamá.
A path of chrysanthemum petals leads the spirits of lost relatives inside to the altar.
In all the houses right now, you'll find chocolate. The Oaxacan people like chocolate a lot. And that's why on all the altars you've got to put out chocolate. When someone dies, it's the thing that most appeals to them.
Y lo que más le apetece a uno, el chocolate. En esta fiesta, el chocolate es la bebida principal.
In this festival, chocolate is the main drink, for the living and the dead. Right now, I'm alive, and I like chocolate. When I die, maybe the living will put out chocolate for me, because I liked it.
Los que queden vivos van a poner chocolate porque me gustaba.
The tree that produces chocolate is cultivated in tropical lowlands all around the world, from Africa's Ivory Coast to Indonesia, Brazil, and Central America. Its name, Theobroma, literally means food of the gods. Cacao trees grow in hot, humid forests under the shade-providing canopy of larger trees. Tiny midge flies pollinate the small cacao flowers that cling directly to the trunk and branches of the tree. The resulting fruit holds the seeds that are processed into chocolate. Though now grown around the world, the plant is native only to Central and South America. In a wild rainforest, monkeys and other mammals eat the pulp from the pod and disperse the seeds. The ancient inhabitants of South America also enjoyed the sweet pulp from wild cacao pods. But the first people to cultivate cacao and process it into chocolate were native to the Mesoamerican lowlands, what is now portions of Mexico and Central America. The Mayan ruins of Comalcalco in the state of Tabasco are located at the center of the largest chocolate-producing region in Mexico. In the nearby plantations, harvesting and processing cacao have changed little in 3,000 years. A cacao tree is harvested several times in a calendar year, and during that time it will yield about 60 pods. Since cacao trees thrive in the shade of larger trees, responsible growers can create, in effect, a double canopy forest that supports a much greater diversity of wildlife than other tropical crops. Cacaoteros, as the workers are called, extract the seeds, or beans, from the harvested pods. Each pod contains enough chocolate beans to produce about 7 cups of hot chocolate, or 2 dark chocolate bars. Some growers finish processing cacao in their own facilities, while others leave the labor-intensive chore to a community cooperative or a local plant where beans are purchased in bulk and then dumped into large bins. Here, the beans ferment in their own sugary pulp for about 3 days. Fermented beans are then spread out and dried in the hot tropical sun. Many producers today dry their beans over a gas-fired roaster for consistency, but in cacao-growing regions, the sight of beans drying in the sun everywhere, from community basketball courts to private front patios, recalls the ancient process.
The Bonaparte murals, some of the most famous murals from the Maya area, show a throne scene, a royal family sitting on top of a throne, and in front of them several big white bundles that are filled with cacao because it has the glyph for cacao right in the front of the bundle. And so we know the royal courts of the Central Payten and the lords and the ladies and their entourages who lived in those royal courts had a royal appetite for cacao, and that they also could not grow much cacao in their areas around their cities. So they had to look to other areas. They had to look to the river valley areas to get their cacao.
In ancient times, a robust cacao trade developed among the people of Central America, bringing great wealth to those who controlled the trade routes. Traveling cacao merchants depended on bonfire signals that lit the coastlines and marked routes, villages, and ports of call. They transported large quantities of bagged cacao by sea and land to major cities far from the coastal lowlands where it was grown. In the Gulf of Honduras, Christopher Columbus, on his 4th voyage to the Americas, spied a canoe as long as a galleon, piled high with trade items, among them cacao, which the Spaniards called almonds. As Columbus's son Ferdinand wrote, "They seemed to hold these almonds at great price. I observed that when any of these almonds fell, they all stooped to pick it up as if an eye had fallen." And for good reason. By the 1400s, cacao beans had become a widely accepted form of currency.
Cacao was a medium of convertibility. That is, everything else was measured in terms of cacao, so that so many cacao beans were worth so many quills filled with gold, so many cacao beans were worth so many cotton mantles. So yes, you could say that cacao was like money.
This 16th century document, illustrated by Aztec scribes and annotated by their Spanish captors, depicts sacks of cacao among the many items to be paid the overlord. And because the beans could be used to purchase every sort of commodity imaginable, from rabbits and jaguar skins to prostitutes and wives, they were even counterfeited.
We know from ethnohistoric accounts that the Aztec markets, periodically merchants would be spotted who had hollowed out the inside of cacao beans and filled them with dirt because it was such a precious substance.
Given the importance of chocolate in commerce, it is fitting that the patron god of cacao was also the god of tribute and trade. He presided over a lavish underworld realm where lesser gods were jealous of the abundant wealth he had gained as a merchant. Like a 9th century traveling salesman, here the merchant god steps away from his backpack of trade goods and approaches a cacao tree, the valued commodity that has brought him great fortune. Spanish chroniclers observed festivals to the merchant god in which plantation owners sacrificed animals, burned incense, and offered up branches of cacao fruit. Every spring, the people of Comalcalco, Mexico, honor another patron of cacao, the Catholic saint of agriculture, San Isidro.
Que viva San Isidro Labrador! Viva San Isidro Labrador! Viva San Isidro Labrador! Hoy vamos a explicar y del Hijo y del Espíritu Santo.
All over the countryside, growers and plantation workers spend days of preparation for this annual May festival. They lash cacao pods to long branches called enramas, which they offer to the church.
The Mexican people, since before the conquest, are very generous in giving offerings to the divinity. I think that the nature of the Mexican is to offer the fruits of his labor to the all-powerful God.
They festoon their plantation vehicles with the enramas in a colorful display of generosity. Animals are also offered to the church and bear the brand of San Isidro. Bicycles, horse carts, farm animals, cars, trucks, and thousands on foot enter from all directions to join the procession. The village fills with a river of cacao-laden enramas, and tens of thousands of cacao pods are deposited in the local church. As they exit the church, villagers take the sacrament of a cool, refreshing cup of pozole, a hearty mixture of ground corn, chocolate, and water, a recipe that precedes the Spanish conquest. Back on the streets, the festival takes a radical turn. In the days that follow, church members and priests roll up their sleeves and prepare the cacao for fermentation and drying. Here, one can imagine a similar scene in ancient times, the processing of cacao for tribute payments to the ruling elite or offerings to the deities. Near Comalcalco, at the church of Cupilco, strands of cacao bean offerings cover the Virgin Mary, echoing the ancient custom of paying homage to another fertility icon, Cacao Woman. In the early 1500s, Christopher Columbus and his explorers were the first Europeans to encounter chocolate, but they were not favorably impressed. After tasting the bitter concoction, one adventurer suggested, "It is more a drink for pigs than for humanity." But later explorers saw it differently. It was Hernán Cortés and his conquistadors who became rapid converts to its magic when they saw Aztec warriors marching a whole day with nothing to eat but chocolate. They also noted that huge supplies of cacao were transported to the capital, Tenochtitlan, where Moctezuma's warehouses reputedly held over 1 billion beans, more than enough to satisfy the king's chocolate addiction. They soon realized the great wealth that was possible from Mexico's lucrative cacao trade. Spanish colonists took control and demanded payment in cacao from the producing areas of Central America. Instead of gold, they found new riches they had not anticipated. But chocolate's potency even eclipsed commerce. It was a stimulant they had never experienced, and they believed it to be an aphrodisiac, for Moctezuma himself, the husband of many wives, drank 50 golden cups of chocolate a day. Even modern renditions portray him as quite a ladies' man, but 50 cups is excessive by any standard. Chocolate makes people crazy. What is it really that drives people to such excess? What makes these maniacs at the chocolate festival in Perugia, Italy, more like the Aztec king than different? Modern pharmacology provides some clues. Certainly our bodies respond to the sugar, but the effects of chocolate are not that simple. In its most pure form, chocolate is a potent cocktail of several mood-altering compounds. 2 of them are caffeine and theobromine, which stimulate the central nervous system. Chocolate then ups the ante with an endorphin, phenylethylamine. This compound, when released into the bloodstream, creates feelings of euphoria like a runner's high or that happy falling in love feeling. Chocolate is also loaded with minerals, vitamins, and antioxidants. All of these attributes combine to make us feel good, but over the centuries, chocolate has also sustained us through hardship. Soldiers in both world wars carried chocolate rations into the trenches, giving them the stamina of Aztec warriors. Explorer Roald Amundsen also valued chocolate's boost to the body and soul. His successful race to the South Pole in 1911 was fueled in part by the energizing drink. On their 1,700-mile trek over ice fields and through blizzards, his team members drank a quart of hot chocolate each morning, consuming many times more chocolate than the ill-fated Scott Party. Over the millennia, thousands of recipes have delivered the divine pleasure of chocolate to the palate of mortals on Earth. And we know what Moctezuma drank was very different from what we enjoy today. Normally, the Aztec drink was a pungent concoction of water, cacao, and ground chili peppers, often mixed with other local ingredients like honey, vanilla, corn, or hallucinogenic substances. In traditional homes, chocolate, made the truly old-fashioned way, starts by roasting dried cacao on a terracotta cooking surface known as a comal. The husk is peeled away to reveal the nib. These kernels of pure chocolate are ground on a metate until the rich, fatty chocolate liquefies into a velvety smoothness. Other ingredients are ground and added to the mix. Add water, whip vigorously, and the result is a delicious chocolate drink of the simplest, purest kind. Today, chocolate continues to be mixed with corn and other flavorings, including black pepper, to create a variety of favorite drinks, such as the pozol of Tabasco or the champurrada of Oaxaca. Mayan vessels revealed the first recorded chocolate recipes. These glyphs describe lost exotic concoctions such as tree-fresh cacao and frothy cacao, among the many recipes enjoyed by chocolate's first connoisseurs. But the most desirable part of the drink has always been the foam on top. One ancient method to raise the foam was to pour liquid chocolate back and forth from a standing position. Chocolate lovers in Latin America today, however, rely on the easy twirl of the wooden molinillo introduced by the Spanish to whip their chocolate into a frothy foam. Many still believe that while chocolate may feed the body, the foam on top represents the vital force of wind, breath, or spirit that feeds the soul. So coveted is the foam that locals of the Oaxaca Valley of Mexico still engage in the arcane practice of burying cacao beans of a particular variety until they calcify. This rarely seen process is known only to a few and is handed down through the generations. Women, and only women, bury the beans in the ground, cover them with layers of sand, woven mats, and dirt, and water them daily for exactly 6 full moons. The result? A chalky white and powdery bean.
Este todavía tiene en la cáscara, mira. Y este ya está pelado. Mira.
When ground and whipped into the many chocolate drinks of Mexico, the patache, as it is known, delivers a frothy head of foam, one that stays alive for hours. And for its almost magical powers, this bean is highly coveted, commanding the highest price of all the cacao beans at the markets. The market towns of the Oaxaca Valley, with native Zapotec names like Tlacolula, Teotitlan, and Zachila, are peppered throughout the region alongside the ancient ruins of Monte Alban, Yagul, and Mitla, among others. One by one, each of these towns and thousands like them fell to the Spanish conquest of the 1500s. Once Spain held dominion over the land, Spanish monks became the guardians of chocolate. Their monastery kitchens were the world's first chocolate laboratories, where chocolate was prepared mainly as a curative. The monks experimented with processing methods and recipes to create a taste more suitable to the European palate. Old world flavorings like anise, cinnamon, almonds, and hazelnuts were mixed with the original ingredients. But when they sweetened the bitter drink with sugar, they rewrote the culinary history of chocolate. The collision between European and Native American cultures led to what is Mexico today. As the cultures penetrated one another, new hybrid forms arose in language, music, art, architecture, and cuisine, and so too in chocolate. The scrumptious drink gained an eager following among the colonists, as well as the Spanish elite back in Europe. By the late 1500s, cacao was being shipped from the Americas to Spain to satisfy demand. The exotic New World treasure spread beyond Spain's borders, as Spanish monks shared their secret with other monks all over Europe. Soon, monastic cravings for chocolate ignited a furor that threatened to divide the Catholic world.
There was a great moral debate in the 17th century about whether or not it was allowed to drink a cup of chocolate during Lent. Was chocolate a religiously sanctioned food or not? Obviously, the doubt arose because of the fact that chocolate was a sumptuous food. It was a rich food. It was a precious beverage. The dispute went on for a long time until finally it was decided that it was not a sin to drink a cup of chocolate during Lent.
The influential Cardinal Brancaccio had weighed in. He ruled that chocolate, mixed just with water, did not break the fast, and further declared that the law should be changed to accommodate this fine beverage. His ruling made chocolate more acceptable to many Catholics, who didn't understand their yearnings for chocolate and thought it to be the work of the devil.
I think one of the reasons Italians love chocolate so much is that in their collective memory there lingers the idea of chocolate as a transgression. And in a Catholic country, a Catholic culture, that is always an incentive to do something.
While the monks were spreading the word of chocolate throughout Europe, Iberian Jews from Spain and Portugal were doing their part as they fled the Spanish Inquisition into the Basque region of France near Bayonne as early as 1602.
Les Juifs portugais qui ont été persécutés par l'Inquisition.
The Portuguese Jews who were being persecuted by the Inquisition sought refuge north of Portugal, and the first port where they disembarked was the port of Bayonne. The Jewish families arrived here and settled in, and among them, some knew the techniques of chocolate making. They arrived with imported cacao beans and several very simple and rudimentary techniques for making chocolate.
Très simple, très rudimentaire pour faire du chocolat.
They lived in the ghetto of Bayonne, where they were forced to stay together. At daybreak, they were allowed to leave the neighborhood and go to the houses of the wealthier people of the time, business owners or important people with a little bit of money, and they went from door to door making chocolate by request. They would crush cacao beans against a stone, and they would mix that with milk or water, adding sugar and spices.
Rajoutant du sucre et des épices.
This provincial region of southern France served another pivotal role in the story of chocolate. By the mid-1600s, the enticing new drink, still too expensive for commoners, began to find its way into the royal kitchens outside of Spain. But most Europeans were slow to take notice. Then, in this church in the small Basque town of Saint-Jean-de-Luz in 1660, the union of Spanish Princess Maria Theresa with Louis XIV of France would make chocolate all the rage.
First of all, this is an extremely important political marriage. It's a marriage that seals the peace between France and Spain, and it's a marriage that had been preordained by the Treaty of the Pyrenees. Not a love marriage, but one that's totally arranged. And Maria Theresa is a small and not a very pretty woman, rather plump and very shy. And since her tender childhood, she had been accustomed to drinking chocolate at the Spanish court.
The sad and lonely Maria Theresa craved the comforts that only chocolate could give, proclaiming, "Chocolate and the king are my only passions."
So she arrives in Paris after her marriage, and at Versailles she introduces chocolate to the court and to Louis XIV. So it is she who initiates the fashionable trend of drinking chocolate among the fairly small circle that was the French nobility. She is the one who started it all.
Chocolate was a hit among those who could afford it. The Spanish transplanted the Maya's sacred tree to the far-flung corners of their empire: Venezuela, Brazil, Ecuador, and the Philippines, all major cacao producers to this day. For over a century, Spain tightly controlled the cacao trade. But when the newly formed Dutch Republic broke Spain's monopoly on sea trade, Dutch merchants made chocolate more accessible to Europeans, and Amsterdam became the second largest importer of chocolate outside of Spain. England and France joined the Netherlands and began growing cacao in their own tropical colonies. New supplies from South America, the West Indies, Indonesia, and Africa eliminated Spain as the middleman. The globalization of chocolate had begun, but at a great price in human suffering, since all the colonists relied on slavery to bring chocolate to the tables of Europe. By the late 1600s, chocolate parlors became popular gathering places where the anti-puritanical atmosphere was often reminiscent of bordellos, and chocolate's reputation as an aphrodisiac charged the air. In Turin, Italy, people are passionate about their chocolate.
Torino ha una grossa storia perché già nel 1600
Turin has a long history since already in the year 1675, the Queen gave the first license to administer and manufacture chocolate, as it was called at the time. But it was still chocolate in a cup, served as a beverage. At the end of the 1600s, beginning of the 1700s, they went from the beverage to a solid product, the first chocolate morsels. So Turin can pride itself on being the capital of Italian chocolate.
From sweet treats to savory dishes, chocolate has worked its way deeply into Italian cuisine and into Turin's renowned coffee houses.
But there was already a tradition in Europe, which was the tradition of coffee. So in Turin, another kind of beverage evolves, which I would say is a sort of marriage between liquid chocolate and coffee. So the biccherine is born, a drink that used to be consumed in the public places of the 1800s, especially in wintertime when the temperatures are so cold. And this warm beverage, very nutritious, very rich in vitamins and minerals, gives a great energetic charge. So it was a cure-all and the best possible thing to be consumed.
The exquisite confections found in Turin today are far removed from their crude beginnings in the 1700s. With several advances during the Industrial Revolution, chocolate evolved into a new product. Dutch chemist Konrad van Houten invented a press that separated the ground beans into cocoa butter and cocoa powder. He also developed a method that neutralized the acids in cacao, creating a defatted powder that was less bitter and water-soluble. This new Dutch chocolate made a delicious hot cocoa and was better for cooking. The Swiss, for their part, were late arrivals to the chocolate party, but their contributions would define what we know as chocolate today.
Another small anecdote, a little piece of gossip that we know for certain, is that Mr. Caillet came to Turin to learn the art of chocolate making.
After 4 years in northern Italy, François-Louis Caillet returned to Switzerland to open the first Swiss chocolate factory in 1819. Inventor Daniel Peter, smitten by Caillet's daughter Fanny, focused his innovative mind on chocolate. With the help of Henri Nestlé, he introduced a new ingredient, condensed milk, which Nestlé had recently perfected for use in his baby food. When Peter combined condensed milk with cocoa powder in 1875, the first milk chocolate was born. Fellow Swiss chocolatier Rudolf Lindt devised a conching process that created a smooth, sensuous texture and allowed chocolate candies to be easily molded. With chocolate in its new form, the industry boomed. In England, J.S. Fry & Sons pioneered the way to making chocolate bars from molds, and their competitors, the Cadburys, were masters of marketing, inventing the first Valentine's Day candy box, a discreet Victorian reference to chocolate's randier reputation. To the progressive-thinking Cadbury family, chocolate was an alternative to the evils of alcohol, and the business of making chocolate a vehicle for social reform. In an era of desperate working conditions, the Cadburys founded Bourneville in 1879, a utopian factory village where employees could live, play, and make chocolate in a tranquil and healthy environment. In North America, chocolate was thriving as well in spite of its late beginnings. Ironically, cacao had taken 150 years since first crossing the oceans to Europe to make its way to the American colonies. Because of English restrictions on trade, cacao traveled the unlikely route from the Caribbean to England and back again to North American shores. In the 1700s, it was sold primarily in apothecaries and, as in Europe, considered a curative for such ailments as indigestion, vapors, and lovesickness. Only the well-connected and well-heeled could afford such an expensive elixir. But after the American Revolution, with trade restrictions relaxed, cacao became less costly, and Americans developed an appetite for chocolate. Within a century, over 900 chocolate makers had emerged to satisfy this burgeoning new market. But it was Pennsylvania-born Milton Hershey, the Henry Ford of chocolate makers, who brought highly mechanized production methods and marketing genius to the North American chocolate industry. Inspired by Cadbury's successful social experiment, Hershey established his own unique factory town in 1903. Like Cadbury, Hershey funded schools, churches, sports facilities, and social programs, all for the benefit of the chocolate-making community now known as Hershey, Pennsylvania. The company promoted chocolate as healthy and nutritious. By the end of World War II, Hershey was a common household name, and chocolate was found in every American cupboard.
Bosco drinks his Bosco. Bosco drinks his Bosco. Bosco loves his Bosco.
You love Bosco too? It's real chocolatey. Putting the Bosco inside.
As more chocolate products sold around the world, chocolate became highly processed, and the subtlety of flavor was lost to the economics of mass production. But not everywhere.
Noi come azienda Peirano abbiamo la patente di fornitore. As the Peirano company, we have the patent as the providers to the Royal House of Savoy. We are today the fourth generation, but still faithful to the recipes that our founder left us. We haven't moved away from the processes that were used in the 1800s. In our recipes, chocolate is never made with just one type of cacao, but with a mixture. Those are the secrets of any real chocolate producer. It's a family thing. It's part of our family.
The secrets vary from shop to shop. Although the modern chocolatiers in Bayonne, France gave up their metates long ago, they have retained traditional chocolate recipes and tools like the Basque stirring stick.
This stick has a whole history. It's a stick that has been cut from the wood of the medlar tree, which is the tree that the Basque walking stick is made from, the stick of the Basque shepherd. This particular stick was cut by my wife's grandfather in 1930, and so it's one of the oldest tokens of the family's roots in the chocolate business. Our family, if you will, illustrates the tradition of families from Bayonne that have owned artisan-like chocolate factories for centuries. In 1875, there were 31 chocolate makers in this small town. It was the third largest economic activity in the city, employing over 200 people. They would export chocolate to the Russian court, to the Empress, to Napoleon III, to the Spanish court. It was exported and consumed all over the world. A lot has changed because now chocolate is made all over the place, but there are still a few family dynasties of chocolate makers that remain here in Bayonne, and we are one of the last.
Chocolate mixed with hot Espelette peppers grown nearby is a fad in Bayonne, reflecting a global trend. A new breed of chocolate makers are redefining the art of chocolate, introducing exotic spices that echo the ancient culinary history of Mesoamerica.
Ça, c'est du piment d'Espelette. C'est un piment qui est très goûteux, très parfumé, qui est à la fois qui est ferme, qui est fort, qui est assez intense en goût, mais qui est relativement doux, qui n'est pas très piquant, un petit peu, mais il a un goût, il a son goût, quelque chose qui va très très bien avec le chocolat, qui parfume. Alors, rien que ça, cette couleur comme ça, ça vaut la recette. On n'a pas besoin même de croquer. Après, on se régale avec les yeux, comme ça.
The people who choose the kind of chocolates they want press the glass with their fingers and go, "Give me 2 of those." There are also these very serious professionals who, when faced with having to choose their chocolates, take on this sweeter, more charming, childlike expression. Because that little chocolate is the joy of their eye and their palate. And there is even the scene of the glutton, who, while the salesperson turns away to get something, quickly reaches behind the glass and snatches a piece of chocolate. And I find this really beautiful because in the end, it means that we, the chocolate makers, are still capable of bringing joy, the joy of all the senses, the joy of a more than benevolent transgression.
The delights of chocolate are irresistible, and the spa at the Hotel Hershey in Pennsylvania has taken our indulgences to new heights. The body is enveloped by the smell, feel, and taste of this magic ingredient as attendants coat visitors with a warm chocolate fondue wrap, the ultimate chocolate ecstasy. For a double dose, patrons spend an hour lounging in Hershey's legendary whipped cocoa bath, where even the most stressed workaholic transforms into a giddy, slightly naughty child. Our passion for chocolate goes beyond just sensory pleasure. Perhaps chocolate transports us to another realm, closer to the divine, much as it did 3,000 years ago as a sacred offering to the gods. Who would have thought that a small brown seed from the Central American tropics could be encoded with such complexity? Chocolate cast its spell long ago, keeping us all under its power. But who's complaining?